Thursday edition of Liquid Lunch. We're breezing through hour two, coming to you today as we do every day, noon to 2 Eastern, live from the Question Tequila Studios. We are downtown on Broadway, just stone's throw from the New York Stock Exchange. And today the New York Stock Exchange is giving up some blood. There's red in the streets and the markets are down about a buck and change. And we'll keep you posted on all of that stuff. But the big news, the DNI is down at Congress and talking about the newly released transcript of the call between Trump and President Zelensky. And now the actual whistleblower complaint, and the DNI, to me, seems to be being quite unpartisan and intelligent, and it looks like it's not getting the effect they wanted. And joining us to talk about this is Dr. John Gans. He's former chief speechwriter for the Pentagon and author of the book White House Warriors. And Doc, thanks for joining us today for a Liquid Lunch.
So good to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So Frankie's with me in studio, and we wanted to ask you, for starters, what's all this DNI testimony? Does the DNI, should they get dragged in front of the whole world and get questioned on every semantic on these things?
Well, I mean, the way the United States government has traditionally handled intelligence is they've given a wide berth and and encouraged Congress to have a strong oversight role on intelligence matters, in part because so much of it is secret that the American people don't often get to do it. So Congress is sort of empowered to specifically look deeply into intelligence matters. And we've learned that lesson the hard way, right? Watergate was, among other things, a controversy that started in misdeeds by the intelligence community. And throughout the 1970s, again in the 1980s, some secret activities of the U.S. government caused a lot of concerns. And so Congress has always played a pretty strong role in this sort of the intelligence reforms after 9/11. What Congress was empowered to do was give these new agencies like the Department of National Intelligence a lot of strong oversight, because people worried that about misdeeds and things that could sort of be misconstrued by the American people.
So, Dr. Gans, I know you worked in the Pentagon as a speechwriter, but your book, you chronicle the role of the National Security Council. You know, we've heard so much about the idea of a deep state, the idea that there are entities within the government, including the Pentagon, that go opposite the way that the elected leadership would like it to go. You seem a pretty sane and sober, nonpartisan guy. Set the record straight for us. Is that a real thing? Is there a deep state?
No, the deep state is sort of a term that was sort of ripped out of a foreign country, right? It's a term that comes from sort of Turkey, right, where there's a sort of deep state of sort of officials, unelected military and bureaucratic actors who sort of work directly to try to counteract the sort of popular will of the country. Generally speaking, and I say this as somebody who's worked in government, served in the Navy Reserve, and has written a book that sort of looked at the National Security Council from Truman to Trump and looked at 10,000 documents, 100 interviews, went to 9 archives. And what I tell people is I never saw a deep state. What you do have is a government, right? And government is not easy, and government doesn't always do exactly what the president wants to do. That's why being president isn't always what it's hyped up to be. And so you do always have resistance in government, whether it's Barack Obama, George W. Bush, or anything else. I was at the government when Barack Obama was frustrated with the Pentagon from time to time, and nobody was accusing it of being a deep state. So a lot of what you're seeing is bureaucratic resistance that's pretty normal. Now, Donald Trump's an unconventional
Well, that sounds, in fairness, Dr. Gans, it sounds, I mean, I get that you don't want to use the term deep state because it's become so politically loaded, but it sounds a little bit like deep state by another name, bureaucratic resistance to what the democratically elected leaders are trying to do.
Yeah, well, I think the difference between a deep state and an organized and a resistance is that it's generally not organized. Most of it is just people protecting their own turf, right? This isn't people who have banded together with some sort of conspiracy.
Sure.
Generally speaking, the reason nobody in Washington can agree on much of anything, what to order for lunch, what to tweet, anything along those lines. This is just what government is. It's people who are empowered. They're strong-minded, generally have strong beliefs, and you have to convince them. The president has to convince them to do what he wants them to do. So that's not really a deep state, because a deep state suggests conspiracy or organization. These are just people who have been here before the president and will be here after the president.
Well,
and they said the same thing about Barack.
Hey, Doc, the one thing I wanted to ask you is, I hear what you're saying. They were there before, they've been after. They've all been kind of cultured and cultivated through the years to realize that they're at the deepest of the backbone of everything. And, it kind of, in some places, feels like they call them career bureaucrats.
Yeah.
It seems like they are the folks that are pulling all the levers through all. And the thing is, they know where the bodies are buried. So at any time, it's almost, we broke a glass. But at any time, this could be like one of these episodes of Scandal, where, they have this whole secret organized entity. It feels like that to me sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and I'm sure it's felt like that to presidents from time to time, including Donald Trump. I think one of the things that Donald Trump didn't quite bargain for is he's a very unconventional president. He knows that. I think he knew he wanted to bring a lot of change to Washington. I think he has not really appreciated how difficult that is to do. Washington's a tough place to change, whether you're John Kennedy, Franklin Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, or anybody else. And I write in the book about stories about these presidents trying to fight with the military, the State Department, and everybody else, from the Korean War to the Afghanistan War, right? This governing isn't always as easy as it seems. And so Donald Trump's getting a certain dose of that. I also say, frankly, that these are people who take their jobs and the laws and the norms and traditions of American foreign policy very seriously. And, they are on watch for things that are sort of contrary to that. And
it's like he's saying all the stuff, like,
but I don't blame him, because deep states become such a Sean Hannity type word to describe everything that doesn't go Donald Trump's way.
Right.
Dr. Gans, give me your take on what we've seen thus far from Joseph McGuire, the acting director of national intelligence, in his testimony before Congress today.
Yeah, I mean, so far what I've caught and what I've sort of read about on Twitter is that he's, I think, trying to do his best to sort of oversee an agency while also presenting the information as requested by the sort of civil leaders of our country, whether it's Donald Trump's White House or the Congress, right? That's how it's supposed to work. I think what people are seeing is that he is in a very difficult position, caught between people in his own organization who think they've seen some wrongdoing, and a president who doesn't think that he's done any wrongdoing, and a Congress that has a lot of questions, right? And so I think he's trying right now as best he can, as best as he's capable of, to sort of walk that line. It's not easy. It's very difficult in these situations, having written congressional testimony for somebody who had to go up to Congress. It's hard, right? There's classifications issues. While you're sitting there, you're trying to be careful about just what you're saying about not crossing any classifications issues, not saying anything that's going to be too easy to tweet, not saying anything that seems too critical of either the people who report to you or the people you report to. So it's not easy. I think he's doing his best to walk the line, but this is a tough story, right? I've looked at a lot of government documents, and I worked in government. These documents are unlike any I've ever seen, right? They demonstrate that the President of the United States was interested in helping pursue at least a piece of his political and personal business while sitting in the office of the presidency. That is a tough thing to sort of get your head around, and we need a lot more data. We need a lot more evidence. We need a lot more of the documents that have been written about this. We need the talking points, the drafts. We need all of this, right? And he's sort of standing in the middle between all of that. So I think he's doing his best. I think that it's not an easy job, and I think at the end of the day, history is going to remember this day. These are documents we're going to be talking about for a long time.
Dr. Gans, thanks so much. You got to come back, and if people are interested in what goes on inside the Pentagon, you got to check out White House Warriors. It's one of the few books that General McMaster actually sat down for an interview for, and was quite candid in the book as well. We'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thanks so much. Love to come back.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So I love when you get these academics on for us, and he's a bright guy, Pentagon guy,
a lot of experience,
speechwriter. I mean, he's been around. He knows where the bodies are buried. He wrote the speeches that covered them up. But it felt like he was saying it's there. But you know, it's not there. But
Well, hey, we'll get the take of Rachel Bovard next. She's the Senior Director of
That's
Policy
right.
for the Conservative Partnership Institute. She's also written a book with Jim DeMint. Still to come, Eileen Fisher, who's your matchmaker, from what I understand.
that's the way it seems. I